You are not going to believe what happened to me. I hired a woman who seemed absolutely perfect, but behind her sweet smile was a plan so twisted it still gives me chills. Slowly, she took everything by ite. Stay with me until the very end, because the twist will leave you speechless. Before I dive into this unbelievable tale, please hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with someone who needs to hear this story. Trust me, you'll want to discuss this with everyone you know. Let me take you back to when my life was completely different. I was married to a successful tax attorney, and we had built what I thought was the perfect life together. We had been married for over 20 years, and I had 2 sons who I'll call my boys to protect their privacy. When I was in my 20s and my husband was in his mid-20s, we started building our empire together. My husband suggested I stay home with the children while he built his law practice, but I've never been the type to sit still. So I did what felt natural to me. I opened a small beauty salon right in front of our house. It started modestly, just me doing hair and a young woman doing nails, but I was passionate about it, and it gave me purpose while raising my children. As the years passed, my husband's law practice flourished. He was making excellent money as a tax attorney, and our lifestyle reflected that success. Our boys attended the best private schools, and I was able to expand my little salon. We moved from our modest home into a mansion, and our wealth continued to grow. By the time our sons were entering university, we owned not just the mansion, but also a beach house, a country house, and a 3-story building that housed my salon on the ground floor, my husband's law office on the 1st floor, and separate apartments for each of our sons on the 2nd and 3rd floors. It was like a family compound, and I loved having everyone so close. When the boys started college, they waited for each other since they were only a year apart. They moved into their apartments in our building. It was the perfect setup. I could work in my salon downstairs, my husband had his office right there, and the boys were just upstairs when they came home from classes. Life felt absolutely perfect. Everything was going smoothly until I made a decision that would change everything. I hired a new employee for my salon, a woman in her 30s who seemed absolutely wonderful. I was 51 at the time, and this woman appeared to be exactly what my business needed. She was incredibly helpful, always going above and beyond, always eager to assist with anything and everything. The word that comes to mind is accommodating. You know those people who seem to genuinely care about helping with every little thing. That was her. She was skilled at hairstyling, worked incredibly hard, and I genuinely enjoyed having her around. Physically, we were similar in some ways, both petite and slim, but very different in others. I had blonde hair cut in a short bob style, always perfectly styled, while she had black hair that fell to the middle of her back with gentle waves. I've always preferred a more modern style, comfortable sneakers, bold patterns mixed with black, keeping up with current fashion trends. What struck me as a bit odd, though I dismissed it at the time, was how curious she was about our personal life. When my family and I would go to the beach house and bring along some of my son's college friends, she would ask detailed questions like, "How many bedrooms does your beach house have?" Or, "Does your country house have a caretaker? How many rooms?" She seemed fascinated by every detail of our possessions and lifestyle. I found it strange, but I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was just making conversation. Or perhaps she was genuinely curious about how successful people lived. The other stylists in the salon seemed bothered by her constant questions, but she was so devoted to me and my business that I overlooked their concerns. About a year after she started working with me, something happened that should have been a massive red flag, but I was too trusting to see it clearly. Our salon was closed on Mondays, so I typically went in on Tuesday afternoons. When I arrived that particular Tuesday, everyone had the strangest expressions on their faces. My new employee wasn't at her usual station in the front of the salon. Someone told me to go check on her in the back area where we had a break room for staff. When I walked back there, I couldn't believe what I saw. The woman who had been hired with long, black, wavy hair was now sporting hair identical to mine. Blonde, straight, cut in the exact same bob style. If you saw us from behind, you would think you were looking at twins. It was so eerily similar that it was unsettling. But that wasn't all. During that year she had been working for me, she had gradually started copying my entire style. She began wearing the same type of sneakers I wore, the same bold patterns mixed with black, even the same perfume. Everything about her appearance was becoming a mirror image of me. When I confronted her about the dramatic hair change, she just smiled and said she had always wanted hair like mine and asked if I liked it. What could I say? She was my employee, and technically she could style her hair however she wanted. But it felt wrong, invasive somehow. How do you tell someone they can't look like you? I started seriously considering letting her go. The whole situation was making me uncomfortable, and I think she might have sensed that her job was in jeopardy. The identity copying continued and escalated. Clients and other employees started getting confused about which one of us was which. It was bizarre and unsettling. She had replicated everything about my appearance so precisely that we were constantly being mistaken for each other. Then, about 7 months after the hair incident, my world completely collapsed. It was a Monday when the salon was closed, so I was at home in our mansion, just relaxing and enjoying the day. My husband came home that afternoon carrying papers, and my heart sank when I realized what they were. Divorce papers. This came completely out of nowhere. Our marriage had seemed strong and happy. He had always been a loving, supportive partner, and I was blindsided by his request for a divorce. When I tried to understand what was happening, tried to fight for our marriage, he was calm but firm. He simply said he didn't want to be married anymore. I was devastated. I called our sons immediately, crying and confused. My older son told me not to sign anything until we could all sit down and discuss the situation. When we examined the divorce papers and the proposed settlement, we discovered something that left us all stunned. Everything we owned, all of our assets, properties, businesses, had been transferred to shell companies and false names. On paper, it looked like we owned nothing. It was as if our entire fortune had vanished into thin air. My son confronted his father about trying to leave me with nothing. I'm not sure exactly what kind of leverage he used, perhaps threats involving tax authorities or other legal consequences, but somehow we managed to salvage something from the wreckage. In the end, I kept the salon and the apartment above it that had been my husband's office. Each of our sons got to keep their apartments in the building. That was it. The mansion, the beach house, the country house, all the cars, everything else disappeared into those shell companies my husband had created. I found myself divorced, financially devastated, and living in the apartment above my salon with my 2 dogs, 2 pugs that my ex-husband had also tried to claim in the divorce. The boys were still living upstairs, which was a comfort, but my entire world had been turned upside down. I fell into a deep depression. I had to completely restructure my life and actually work for survival instead of working for enjoyment as I had before. My standard of living dropped dramatically. Where I once had the luxury of spending my salon income on myself while my husband provided for everything else, now I was solely responsible for supporting myself. During this incredibly difficult period, my helpful employee was even more supportive than usual. She seemed to understand that I needed extra assistance while I was struggling with depression and the massive life changes. Then, about 6 months after my divorce was finalized, she disappeared. She sent an email requesting to quit and then simply vanished without any further explanation. Honestly, at that point, it felt like one less problem to deal with. I was trying to rebuild my life and my business, and her constant presence had become somewhat overwhelming anyway. 3 weeks after she quit, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. She had reappeared on social media, posting photos showing that she was in a serious relationship. But the man in the photos was my ex-husband. And the location of these photos? They were taken in my former mansion. When I had moved out of the mansion and into the apartment above the salon, I had to do renovations to convert the space back from a commercial office to a residential apartment. I could only take a limited amount of furniture and belongings. You can't fit the contents of a mansion into a 3-bedroom apartment. I took the pieces I loved most, the kitchen items I wanted, and the things that would fit in my new space. My sons already had their apartments furnished since they had been living there during college. But this woman, this person who had copied everything about me, she didn't just move into my former home. She completely redecorated it, buying new furniture that was identical to what I had originally chosen. She had taken over not just my husband, but my entire aesthetic and living situation. Here was someone 20 years younger than me, who now had my appearance, was living with my ex-husband in my former mansion, using my former beach house and country house that I would never see again, driving my former car. She had literally stepped into my life and claimed it as her own. The situation became even more twisted when my sons saw her driving my old car. They were so angry that they actually keyed the vehicle. The confrontation that followed was so intense that my ex-husband eventually returned my sons' cars to them and put the titles in their names. But my car? That stayed with her. The identity theft continued in the most disturbing ways imaginable. She bought 2 pugs, the same breed as my beloved dogs. She had 3 children with my ex-husband, 2 boys and a girl, and named the boys the exact same names as my sons. The only thing she didn't do was name the daughter after me. But at that point, nothing would have surprised me. My ex-husband even opened a salon for her since she was also a hairstylist. And here's where the obsession reached truly frightening levels. She would regularly send people from her salon to spy on my business. Whenever I made changes to my salon's decor or layout, she would implement identical changes in hers. The copying extended to every detail of my personal style. When I decided to change my hair color to a reddish auburn, a very specific, difficult-to-achieve shade, she somehow managed to match it exactly. When I went back to blonde, she followed suit immediately. She even used clothing and accessories that I had left behind in the mansion when I moved out. Items that had been mine, that I couldn't take with me, she was now wearing as if they had always belonged to her. This woman had completely absorbed my identity. She looked like me, lived in my former home, was married to my former husband, had children with similar names to mine, operated a business modeled after mine, and even wore my former belongings. It was like watching someone else live the life that had been stolen from me. The psychological impact of this experience was devastating and long-lasting. It's one thing to go through a divorce and lose material possessions, but it's entirely different to watch someone else step into your exact life and continue living it as if you never existed. Years have passed since this happened, and while I've rebuilt my life and found my footing again, the emotional scars remain. It's difficult to understand how someone could develop such an obsession, how they could systematically plan to take over another person's entire existence. The most heartbreaking part is that this woman claimed she did all of this because she loved me so much and admired me so greatly. But love and admiration don't drive someone to steal your husband, copy your appearance, and take over your life. That's something much darker and more disturbing. My sons and I eventually came to understand that my ex-husband had likely been planning this betrayal for some time. The way he had hidden our assets, the timing of everything, the fact that he was ready to immediately move on with someone who looked exactly like me, it all pointed to a calculated plan rather than a spontaneous decision. Today, I've learned to view this experience almost like watching a movie. If I think too deeply about the reality of what happened, about how someone completely stole my life and is still living it, I risk falling back into the depression that consumed me for so long. I've had to accept that the life I built for over 20 years belongs to someone else now, and I've had to create an entirely new identity and existence for myself. It's been one of the most challenging experiences imaginable, but it's also taught me resilience I never knew I possessed. The strangest part is that somewhere out there, this woman is still living my former life, still maintaining my former appearance, still raising children with my sons' names in my former home. It's like I've been erased and replaced, but I'm still here, watching it all happen. This is a true story that was shared with me by a follower on social media who wanted to remain anonymous. I was so moved by her courage in sharing such a personal and traumatic experience that I felt it needed to be told. If you found this story as shocking as I did, please subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with others. Stories like this remind us how important it is to trust our instincts and recognize red flags before they develop into something this devastating. Leave a comment below and let me know what you think about this incredible story. Have you ever experienced anything similar? Or do you know someone who has? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this unbelievable tale of identity theft and betrayal.